The room 333. David Reynolds arrived at the Harrison Hotel late at night. Rain hammered against the glass ceiling of the lobby, dim lamps casting long shadows across the marble floor. The exhausted front desk clerks, their smiles tight and rehearsed, handed out keys to the last few late-night guests. When his turn came, the receptionist, a frail-looking older woman with dark circles under her eyes, glanced at his reservation and froze for a brief moment. "Mr. Reynolds," she murmured, scanning the list with a finger, "I'm afraid we don't have any standard rooms left." She hesitated. "The only available option," her voice wavered, as if she were reluctant to continue, "is room 333. David frowned. "And what's the problem?" The woman lifted her gaze to meet his. "Normally, we don't rent out that room. It's always left vacant." "Why?" he asked. "That's just how it's always been," she replied quickly. "You could wait until morning. Perhaps another room will become available." David exhaled sharply, irritation flickering in his expression. He was utterly drained from the long-haul flight, barely staying upright as it was. "That's not going to work for me. I need a room now." The receptionist didn't answer right away. A flicker of concern passed over her features, but seeing the determination in his eyes, she finally nodded slowly. "As you wish." She retrieved a key card, hesitating for just a second too long before reluctantly handing it to him. Her fingers lingered on the plastic, as if she was having second thoughts. "If anything seems unusual," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "please let us know immediately." David barely acknowledged her words as he took the card. Probably just some local superstition. This was an old hotel after all. The third floor was quiet. The hallway was long and narrow, the walls lined with faded wallpaper that had once been elegant, but now looked worn and tired. Room 333 was at the very end of the corridor. As David approached, he noticed something strange. The room number plaque was scratched, as if someone had tried to deface it. The doorknob also looked newer than the others, like it had been recently replaced. He slid the keycard in. With a soft click, the lock released. The room was dark. His fingers found the light switch. The overhead lamp flickered twice before hesitantly coming to life, filling the space with a dull, yellowish glow. A standard hotel room. Bed, desk, TV, minibar. Nothing unusual. And yet, something felt off. A faint, indescribable presence. Not a sound, not a movement, just a subtle wrongness in the air. Like the room didn't belong to him. David shook his head, brushing off the feeling. It was just exhaustion. Tomorrow everything would feel normal again. He locked the door, tossed his suitcase into the corner, and collapsed onto the bed. His body felt heavy, sleep pulling at him fast. And then, thud. A distant, muffled sound. David's eyes snapped open. Thud, somewhere in the room. Slowly he sat up, his heartbeat picking up speed. Thud, thud, thud. He turned his head. The sound was coming from the wardrobe in the corner of the room. Something was inside. David froze. His breath hitched, every muscle in his body tensed. He stared at the wardrobe door, where the knocking continued, steady, deliberate, as if someone was tapping their knuckles from inside. "It's just an old hotel. The wardrobe must have settled," he whispered to himself, but his voice didn't sound convincing. Thud, 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 louder. David slowly lowered his feet to the floor. The old wood creaked beneath his weight. He paused, listening. Silence. He took another step. Footsteps echoed back, not from the wardrobe, from outside, in the hallway. A cold, paralyzing fear gripped his chest. His hands shook as he reached for the wardrobe handle and yanked it open. Empty. The hangers swayed, and for a brief moment in the dim hotel lighting, the shadows inside seemed to move on their own. Then, a creak. David whipped around. The door to his room was slowly opening. Beyond it, the hallway was pitch black. Empty, but deep within the darkness, something moved. A figure, tall, unnaturally thin. Its shape was impossible to fully make out, but David knew it was watching him. He stood frozen, unable to look away. Panic clawed at his insides, locking his limbs in place. And then the door began to close again. Not just swinging shut, something was pulling it closed. David staggered back, hitting the edge of the bed. His palms were slick with sweat. His breathing was uneven, ragged. "Who's there?" he rasped, no response. Just a faint, shallow breathing from the other side of the door. He reached for the phone on the bedside table. The screen was black, not locked, turned off. A whisper. The words were unintelligible, but the sound sent ice down his spine, as if something had exhaled cold air directly into his ear. Thud. David flinched. Thud. Louder. Thud. 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 The sound erupted from all around him, from the wardrobe, from under the bed, from behind the walls. He was surrounded. His breath hitched. He lunged for the door, but before he could reach it, the light suddenly flared to life. The room was silent again, perfectly normal, except for one detail. The mirror across from his bed was scratched, deep, jagged grooves, as if fingernails had traced lines across the glass. From the inside, a lump formed in David's throat. Slowly, he approached the mirror. The scratches formed words. "You shouldn't have come." The knocking stopped, but behind him, soft footsteps, slow, soundless. And then he felt it, a breath, right against the back of his neck. A voice followed, low, distorted, whispering directly into his ear. "First night." David stumbled back, tripping over the edge of the carpet and hitting the floor hard. His heart thundered in his chest. His palms were clammy with sweat. He spun around. The room was empty. The scratched mirror, the wardrobe, the bed. Everything remained in place, but the air felt heavier, thick with something stale, as if no one had breathed in this room for years. He pushed himself up, gasping, and rushed to the door. His fingers wrapped around the cold handle. It wouldn't budge. Locked. David let out a shaky, nervous laugh, trying to convince himself the lock had just jammed. He pressed his shoulder against the door and shoved. Nothing. And then the room shifted. Not physically. The space itself changed. David felt a wrongness ripple through the air, as if the walls were breathing, expanding and contracting. The light beneath the door dimmed. The hallway was getting darker. And then the bed creaked. David turned his head slowly. Someone was lying there. He couldn't see its face, only the outline of a body beneath the covers, too still, too lifeless. But he felt its gaze. David backed up, his spine hitting the door. His breath came in frozen gas, his lungs seized with fear. The thing in the bed turned its head toward him. Beneath the blanket, something shifted. The sheets pulled tight, as if whatever was underneath was reaching for him. A whisper, indistinct words, warped and broken, like a radio signal lost in static. David didn't want to hear them. He didn't want to know what it was saying. He lunged for the window, ripping the curtains open. But outside, there was nothing. Black void. The city was gone. The rain had stopped. There was no outside. And then, the bed creaked again. David whirled around. The bed was empty. The blanket was crumpled, the sheets disturbed, but no one was there. He took a hesitant step back, his eyes locked on the bed. And then he saw it, the mirror. His own reflection stood frozen on the glass. Except, it wasn't mirroring him. David stood motionless, but his reflection smiled. Slowly, its lips curled into a twisted, unnatural grin. And then, it blinked. David hadn't blinked. Panic shot through him, but before he could react, the lights went out. Darkness, heavy, suffocating. David gasped, struggling to breathe. And then, he felt it. The floor beneath him had changed. He tensed, pressing his fingers down. Cold tile, the smell of dampness, a faint, distant drip of water. David's fingers grazed the wall, and his stomach twisted. It was wet. Not his room. He inhaled sharply. And then, the light returned. But it wasn't his room. He was somewhere else. A different hotel room. Another floor. The layout was similar, but off. The walls peeled, the carpet coated in dust, the wardrobe tilted, as if it had been moved but never put back. David took a step forward, and his foot landed in something wet. Blood. A thin, fresh trail leading from the door to the bathroom. He could hear the drops. Drip, drip, drip. His breath shuddered. Slowly, he approached the bathroom and pushed the door open. The mirror above the sink was scratched, stained, but his reflection was visible, and it was staring at him. David's lips trembled. The figure in the mirror didn't move, just stood there, watching, waiting. And then, it stepped forward. David spun around and ran. David stumbled into the hallway, barely catching himself before he tripped over his own feet. The lights overhead flickered weakly, as if struggling to stay on. The corridor looked wrong. Longer than before, the doors weren't where he remembered them. His room was supposed to be on the left, but when he turned, there was only a wall. David sucked in a shaky breath, stepping backward. The damp air burned his lungs. It smelled of mold, dust, and something rotten. Something was here with him. He took another step and almost screamed when something soft crunched beneath his foot. He looked down, his own key card, lying broken in half on the carpet. "No, no, no," he whispered, picking up the shattered pieces with trembling fingers. Then, a sound, faint at first, almost indistinguishable, like bare feet dragging across the carpet. Slow, unhurried. Step, step, step. David couldn't move. Someone was coming toward him. The darkness at the end of the hallway seemed alive. And then, something stepped out of it. A figure, tall, thin, a silhouette barely visible in the dim light. It stopped, as if it had noticed him too. David held his breath, and then it moved. Its footsteps made no sound. David stepped back, feeling his spine press against the wall. There was nowhere to go. The figure approached, its form becoming clearer. It shouldn't exist. It was too dark, too unnatural, as if light itself refused to touch it. "What are you?" David exhaled, his voice breaking. The figure stopped. Then, its head snapped to the side, and David heard it breathe, a low, wet, gurgling inhale, as if its lungs were filling with darkness. "You shouldn't have come." The voice was his own, distorted, hollow, wrong. The darkness around him began to close in. The lights flickered, growing weaker, until only one dim glow remained, right above David's head. The figure took one final step forward. David couldn't see its face, but he felt it. He felt its gaze burrowing into him. And then, in a final, desperate act, he did the only thing his body allowed. He threw himself into the nearest door. It gave way. David collapsed inside and slammed it shut behind him. The darkness outside vanished. Panting, he turned and froze. He was in room 333. But it was different. The wallpaper was cracked. Black mold crept up the corners. The furniture was covered in dust, untouched for decades. And on the bed, something was sitting there. Not a man, not a creature. It was his reflection. David couldn't move. The thing slowly lifted its head. And then, it smiled. David couldn't move. His reflection sat on the bed, head tilted, smiling. Its lips slowly peeled apart, revealing nothing. Where teeth should have been, there was only an endless, gaping void. "You shouldn't have come," it whispered in his own voice. David staggered back, but his legs felt weak, unsteady. The thing didn't move, yet he could feel it pulling at him, as if his consciousness was draining into the darkness inside its mouth. "Who are you?" he choked out, his voice trembling. The reflection slowly stood up. Its movements were wrong, jerky like a puppet learning how to walk. "I was waiting for you," it whispered. And then, the room shook. Cracks split across the walls, and from them, a thick, black liquid began to ooze. Behind the reflection, the mirror convulsed, as if something was trying to break through from the inside. David lunged for the door, yanking at the handle. Locked. "No, no, please, let me out!" He pounded his fists against the wood, but the door wouldn't budge. Laughter, a low scraping sound, filling the room from every direction. He turned back. The reflection was gone, but it was close. David couldn't see it, but he could feel it, breathing right behind him. A cold, sticky breath brushed against his neck. "This is your room now." The whisper brushed against his ear, his voice, but warped, wrong, not his own. Fingers touched his shoulder, and then everything went black. The next morning, the Harrison Hotel's receptionist, Mrs. Hill, stepped up to the front desk, reviewing the guest list. A young clerk was already there, looking uneasy. "Good morning, Mrs. Hill. Something strange with room 333 again?" She slowly looked up. "What exactly?" The clerk hesitated. "It's empty," he murmured. "Like no one ever stayed there. But we gave out a key, didn't we?" Mrs. Hill sighed. She opened the registration book. The entry for room 333 was blank. The guest's name was gone. She stared at it, then at the clerk. "Is there anyone inside?" he asked quietly. Mrs. Hill shook her head slowly. There's no one there." But even as she spoke the words, she didn't believe them. A long, heavy silence settled over the room. Then, something dropped onto the front desk. A key card, snapped in half. Mrs. Hill picked it up carefully, holding it between two fingers, as if afraid to touch it. Then deliberately, she took a red pen and crossed out the room number from the hotel's rental list, because no one stays here longer than 3 nights. And from room 333, no one ever comes back.
If this story made your heart race, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button to support new chilling tales and tap the bell. That way, you won't miss the next dose of horror. In the comments, let us know how much you enjoyed the story and which themes scare you the most. Who knows? Maybe your idea will become the next nightmare.